What's happening, y'all, man? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores. And anything going on with my Georgia Bulldogs, antennas already up. Feel my spidey senses tingling. But now that Roquan Smith may potentially be available, should the Washington Commanders go trade for him? Y'all know, huge Bulldog fan. My fault. Huge fan of some champions. And I felt like with me being one of the very few Georgia Bulldog fans in the Commander fan base and content creator circles, shout out my boy Big Doug, first of all. Huge Georgia fan as well. Shouts out Merle for always calling in and shouting out the Bulldogs, saying let's go Bulldogs. But I felt like it was only right for me to talk about what's going on. Now, y'all know me, Rico at Street Scores. We got to do a deep dive into everything. We got to look at statistics. We're going to look at injury history as well. But the main points I'm going to go through, we're going to start with what's going on, why he wants to leave. Then we're going to go to why Roquan will leave Chicago. And then we're also going to talk about why Roquan Smith will actually end up staying in Chicago. We're going to give reasons and examples for both. And then same thing for the Commanders. Why we should go get him and also why we shouldn't go get him. And then we're going to take a look at his contract and how much cap space the Washington Commanders have. Can we afford him? And then also right before I started recording this video, the Bears GM came out and gave a statement on the situation. So we're going to dive into that as well. And then at the end, I'm going to give my overall verdict. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure y'all pull up tonight, 6 p.m. for the Sunday call-in show that's been rescheduled to Tuesday. It will be Sunday from now on, but I wasn't able to do it this past Sunday with my family event. Also, make sure you pull up every Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. for the broadcast show where we talk about everything sports, anime, music, everything that's going on. We're going to talk about DeJounte Murray versus Paolo Banchero, Serena Williams retiring, anything funny going on, all of it. And without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so first of all, let's start with why Roquan wants out. I mean, to go to the very beginning, I was working out. We go to like this outside gym, and I saw a notification on my phone that said Bears All-Pro linebacker says he wants out in lengthy post that includes the headline, "The new front office regime doesn't value me here," unquote. And so he requested a trade. Not as serious as demanding a trade though. Remember, Roquan Smith is entering the final year of his rookie contract and he's been wanting a new deal, but so far both sides are far apart on that new deal. And he posted a statement, a heartfelt statement about where he comes from, of course, Macon County, Georgia, and he talks about his memories with the Bears and everything, and then dives into why he's requesting a trade and how he doesn't feel valued and a whole bunch of stuff. It's a pretty lengthy statement, so if you wanted to go read that, definitely feel free to do so. Of course, I had to. Georgia guy, anything with Georgia, I'm checking out everything. I mean, I've been looking at George Pickens highlights as if I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I've been keeping up with James Cook over there in Buffalo. I've been keeping up with Travon Walker and even Zamir White during the Hall of Fame game, and sadly my boy Tyson Campbell, the cornerback, got hurt for the Jaguars. I mean, I'm keeping up with everybody, especially a second team All-Pro and Roquan Smith whenever he says anything, especially when it comes with tension between him and his current team and the potential for him to end up on the Washington Commanders, my favorite NFL team. Now, y'all know I go all out for Georgia, but at the end of the day, it's Washington Commanders as a priority. Commanders are 1A, my Georgia Bulldogs are 1B, and then everything else is 3 and below. So the potential of being able to put those two together is amazing to me. But again, we got to dive into the logic of why we should and why we shouldn't go get them. But before then, Roquan Smith basically just talked about how he lost trust by what he believes are their attempts to take advantage of him. And he also feels like the entire process hasn't been a negotiation, just the Bears trying to strong arm him with a take it or leave it type of deal. And I would feel disrespected if I felt that way. Maybe the Bears aren't necessarily trying to portray that, but if that's how Roquan Smith is taking it, then of course he feels disrespected there. And he also went on to say that it's a backloaded offer, which wouldn't make him the highest paid in actual salary. It also included proposed de-escalators that not a single player out of the 94 non-QB $15+ million per year contract contracts have, so he's super offended. They're putting stipulations in his contract that other players that are at least really good don't have. Guys that he's better than at their respective positions, whether it be quarterback, receiver, whoever, don't even have the stipulations that he has in his contract that they're trying to offer him. And also, he feels like him taking that contract would hurt the linebacker market overall. If he takes a contract like that, then other teams are going to be like, well, Roquan Smith only took this amount of money. You should take even less than that type of thing. So he feels like he'll also be doing a disservice to all linebackers out there if he were to do that, because it's definitely becoming a less valued position, which we're definitely going to talk about when we get to the why we shouldn't trade for him. Now, moving on to why Roquan Smith will leave Chicago, because this definitely seems like the most interesting answer. Brad Spielberger brings up a good point that those de-escalators that Roquan Smith talked about, they're really prevalent in a lot of Saints contracts overall and a couple of other teams around the NFL, but he is saying that those stipulations do kind of make sense for an off-ball linebacker. But Brad also goes on to say that it also makes a lot of sense why Roquan Smith is offended. Also, people are bringing up the fact that Roquan Smith does not have an agent, but Bobby Wagner didn't have an agent, and he reset the off-ball linebacker market without that agent this past offseason. Along with Laramie Tunsil, DeAndre Hopkins, there's a few really good prominent players out there that don't have agents, and they're still able to get the contracts that they want. Lamar Jackson doesn't have one either, and I'm still pretty sure he's going to end up getting a ridiculous contract and probably reset the market when he does sign his new contract. It may not beat Deshaun Watson in guaranteed money, but it's going to reset the market on a per year value. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the next highest paid quarterback. Again, not guaranteed wise, because I mean, Deshaun Watson's contract is absolutely ridiculous. And also, even though Roquan Smith doesn't have an agent per se, he has some good advisors in his camp, so I think he'll be pretty straight. But the Bears GM seems dug in. He's going to be stubborn. I think it's going to be really hard for them to find a mutual agreement here as far as a contract goes. We'll see. And just to let you know, just based on Spot Track, they're assuming that Roquan Smith is probably going for at least $17 million per season. And where the Bears are right now in a rebuild, paying $17 million per season for an off-ball linebacker, which again is becoming a position that's losing value, just like running back. It's not as bad as running back, but it's still losing value, even after Bobby Wagner just reset the market for linebackers. But it's still not one of the most valuable positions in football. I mean, according to how we rank positions in their value, even though Roquan Smith is an all-pro and he completely changes a defense if he's added to your team, but he's an off-ball linebacker. And teams also feel like they can probably just find those guys in the draft. But going back to the point that the Bears, their situation, paying $17+ million per year for an off-ball linebacker when the rest of your team is pretty much sorry. I mean, there's some good players here and there, but for the most part, typically teams that pay that much for an off-ball linebacker are like, all right, let's get this done and let's go get this Super Bowl real quick within the next 2-3 years. The Bears are nowhere near that step, and it's really hard to pay an off-ball linebacker that kind of money while you're in a rebuild mode. I mean, I really feel sorry for another sort of ex-Georgia Bulldog, and Justin Fields is out there struggling because it's him, Darnell Mooney, and friends out there. I don't even know why they let go of Charles Leno, because now he's one of the more underrated left tackles in football. It just seems like they're not making any good decisions over there, and I just don't see the team getting any better anytime soon. They have a nice couple of running backs, but they keep getting hurt. Trust me, as a fantasy team player, I know. I was going through it last year between all them Bears running backs. I was a waiver wire warrior. I was struggling though. But yeah, man, the way the team is currently set up and their future outlook, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to pay Roquan Smith a lot of money. Just let him go to another team that can pay him and give him the opportunity to win a Super Bowl. I mean, I'd be happy about that as a Georgia Bulldog fan. Another Georgia Bulldog getting the ring like my boy Matthew Stafford did this past season. Of course, I'd prefer him to come to us, but if the Washington Commanders can't get him, I want him to go somewhere where he can win a Super Bowl, as long as it's not another NFC East team, please. And of course, with where the Bears are and their franchise, again, they're not Super Bowl contenders. It makes them value the linebacker position differently from another team. Again, if there's a team out there that's a Super Bowl contender and they feel like they're just a Roquan Smith away from being a really strong Super Bowl contender, they're going to value not only off-ball linebacker more, but Roquan Smith specifically more than what the Bears value him as right now. I mean, you pay Roquan Smith $17+ million per year and you're winning 5 games a season. What good did it do you? Now let's move on to why Roquan Smith will end up staying in Chicago. Not very likely, but there's a way. First of all, So I can see from both sides why they're unable to meet in the middle. Roquan Smith should not have to take a pay cut, and the Bears are looking at it like, I mean, even after we pay you, what are we going to win? So what's the point of putting all of that money and only hurting our rebuild process and our chances of getting more young talent? I mean, granted, you could trade him for some really good draft picks potentially, but then again, it's going to be hard to do that because he's on the last year of his rookie deal and he's a $9 million cap hit right now. So you're going to trade for Roquan Smith. He's going to eat up $9 million on his final year of his contract. And then you're going to have to hope that he signs a long-term deal with you and that you didn't just give up a whole bunch of draft capital and maybe even some players to get him for no reason, just a one-year rental. So I think that actually kind of depletes his value in trade negotiations. I'm pretty sure teams are calling the Bears right now about Roquan Smith, but nobody's offering anywhere near as much as what the Bears want because of the exact reason that I just laid out. There's definitely a scenario where you just end up trading for Roquan Smith and only having him for 1 year. Maybe there's a Super Bowl contender out there that's comfortable in their own skin enough to try that, but it's not a big market out there for that right now, man. It's gonna have to be a team that can afford them and has the draft capital. Speaking of draft capital, we got to talk about ours when we get to our section when I talk about why we shouldn't get them / can't get them. And it's really interesting because the Bengals, who are in a Super Bowl window, are basically going through the same problem right now with Bates. But at the very least, you pay him, you have a chance of winning a Super Bowl with him. And they're struggling to pay him. The Bears situation is way worse. And I just got a notification of a Darnell Mooney one-handed snag. Y'all gonna stop trying to hype him up like this offense is about to be elite. I like Darnell Mooney a lot, but y'all still doing my boy Justin Fields dirty with the rest of the weapons around there. I mean, they do have an intriguing tight end out there. I forgot his name. I liked what I saw from him coming out of the draft recently, but I don't know, man. But in that big statement that Roquan Smith put out, he did say, quote, maybe ownership can fix this, unquote. Also, maybe he's basically pulling somewhat of a Deebo Samuel. Again, it's going to be really difficult for the Bears to find a way to trade him, so he may just end up staying put. And that contract, that 1 year situation is crazy. And going back to Deebo Samuel, it worked. It was more so a hold in than a hold out, like he was still participating in practices and things like that, and he got his money. Maybe Roquan Smith is trying to do a similar thing with the Bears. And then Courtney Cronin on Twitter broke it down very well. She said a couple of things to consider with Roquan Smith. Just because Smith said in his statement that he doesn't see a path to the organization does not rule out eventually getting the deal done, but again, he did say maybe ownership can fix this. She goes on to say the Bears and Smith may be at an impasse now, but this can very well be an effective negotiating tactic from a player who represents himself. Not having an agent handle the back and forth with the Bears front office means that Smith has to get his message out somehow to benefit his own interests. He chose to do that with this 2-page statement where he addressed where and why things have come up short between himself and the Bears, while he's not made available to the media directly while on the PUP list. So this is the only way he can really get it out there that he wants his money, and if you're not going to pay me, trade me. And she goes on to say he basically just creatively found a way to get his side of the story out there. So this could just all be a ploy to convince the Bears one way or another to go ahead and pay him his money so he can stay with Chicago. Now let's move on to why the Washington Commanders should trade him, and I feel like a lot of those reasons are fairly obvious. I mean, 2018 first round pick out of Georgia, 8th pick overall, 2-time second team All-Pro, 2020 and 2021. I mean, fresh off the second team All-Pros. Last season and the season before that. It's not like he was All-Pro way earlier in his career and he's been in the league for like 8 years and now he's like starting to fall out of his prime. If anything, he's only getting better. He may not even be in his prime yet, athleticism-wise and maturity-wise. He's only 25 years old. So the potential is limitless. I mean, as an off-ball linebacker, he already has 14 sacks. And of course, 524 tackles, along with 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 5 interceptions, 17 pass deflections as a linebacker. Remember, he was just drafted in 2018, and he even has a defensive touchdown, taking away points and scoring them. Did I mention he was a Georgia Bulldog? But also, really interesting advanced stat, Roquan Smith is the only player in the NFL with 500 plus tackles and 40 plus tackle for losses since 2018. That's a really good stat. That's some playmaking right there. Because tackle for losses mean that you're making plays in the backfield. They're not going for positive yardage. It's one thing to lead the league in tackles, but you're making them all past the line of scrimmage, 2 yards, 5 yards down the field. I mean, granted, you tackled the guy, and that's better than nothing, but it's not really impacting the game. Tackles for losses change a drive, change a game. Now the team is in 2nd and long, 3rd and long. That changes what the offensive coordinator can call for their plays. That's huge. And even with all of that, coverage is probably his best skill set. You can argue instincts may be 1A, coverage 1B. Everything else comes after that. Rushing the passer, tackles for losses in the backfield. He can literally do it all. He's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Now, it seems like he's been painted as relatively injury prone, but he's really only missed like 3-4 games in his career. His last season at Georgia, he was dealing with a pectoral injury in the spring, but he recovered from that by the time camp started and he was ready to go the entire season. And then coming out as a rookie to the Chicago Bears, he was dealing with a left hamstring injury for a week during training camp, and then he was ready to go after that like nothing happened. And then 2019, he had a pectoral tear, another pectoral injury. That's my only concern, the fact that the one he had at Georgia was a pectoral injury, and then the same thing happened in 2019, and it was during a win over the Cowboys, and then he had surgery, he ended up on injured reserve, and then he just missed the last 3 games of the season. That's it. And again, that was December 2019. He hasn't missed a game, hasn't missed a start since. He's been banged up relatively, but he's been there and he's been producing at a high level again, being named 2nd team All-Pro 2020 and 2021 after his most recent injury where he was on the injured reserve. So the injury isn't bothering him at all. He went on to have his best seasons of his NFL career after the pectoral injuries. And then of course, I mean, we can talk for hours about how Roquan Smith can help us X's and O's wise, but just to put it simply, he would easily be the best linebacker we've had since London Fletcher. And if we're talking ceiling potential and talent, he can definitely be better than London Fletcher at the end of the day. I mean, he has future Hall of Famer written all over him. Granted, I feel like London Fletcher should be a Hall of Famer, but I think Roquan Smith, even on a bad team, is going to be one of those guys that's just too good to even deny. I mean, you plug him into this defense, and you can argue we should have the best defense in the NFL. I mean, one of our biggest worries about the team is if Jamin Davis is ready to go out there and ball out, and I'm higher on Jamin Davis than most people, but if it makes sense, if we can pay him, if we have the draft capital to do it and we want to do it, go do it. Don't let Jamin Davis stop you from getting Roquan Smith. Again, I'm a huge fan of Jamin Davis. Another Georgia guy. I mean, he didn't go to Georgia, but he's from Georgia. He's from the metro area of Atlanta, about 30-40 minutes out. So I'm rooting for him probably even more than most people, probably more than anybody else. But again, you don't pass up on a Roquan Smith if there's any small chance that we can get him. Love Cole Holcomb. Should play 100% of the snaps. But you get a Roquan Smith, if Jamin Davis is as good as I hope he is, then we're just going to be out there with 3 linebackers more often. And we're going to talk about how often we'll be out there with 3 linebackers soon when we get to this why we should not and why we can't get them. But still, again, Roquan Smith, again, only 25 years old. He's not even an entire 2 years older than Jamin Davis. And they seem like they're just miles apart in production, age, everything, maturity. Roquan Smith is still only 25. Just to put it in perspective, that's the only reason I'm bringing up Jamin Davis's age. Roquan Smith immediately makes your defense elite, especially ours. I mean, I think this defensive line, especially after we just fired Sam Mills, is going to be elite, is going to bounce back, is going to be more like his 2020 self than his 2021 self, especially once Chase Young comes back fully healthy. And then the secondary is playing way better now. Communication, we added talent. There's a lot more continuity. I mean, we pretty much have the same 11 starters going from last year to this year, but we also just added really good depth. And again, that continuity of having the same 11 starters from the previous season, now communication is way better, and that's going to help the linebackers as well. Roquan Smith would be even better if the defenders around him were better. Just imagine how much better Roquan Smith would be in our defense than even he's been for the Bears, making 2nd team All-Pro. Just imagine Roquan Smith comes here and he only has to do what he has to do. He's not out here making up for other people's mistakes and other people's weaknesses, having to do things outside of his role and responsibility. Imagine if he came here and we just asked him to specifically do a set few things, don't worry about nothing else, because we have so much talent around you, we got you covered. Just be really elite at like a set few 2 to 5 things and you're good. Just imagine how much better he would play for us behind this defensive line, which would allow his instincts and his coverage skills, again, the best parts about him, to shine even more. But now the happiness stops. Let's talk about why not, why we shouldn't get him and why we can't, because those are both basically the same thing but a little different. Now, first of all, there's no reason we haven't already called them. I mean, I'll do it if I got to, Ron Rivera. If I need to call up and ask what you're willing to do for the Commanders as far as the deal goes, I'll do it. I'm pretty sure we have already called, but I highly doubt anything happens. We got to dive into why. First of all, Ron Rivera speaks very highly of his 2 young linebackers. Now, granted, that could just be coach talk. And if Roquan Smith just for any crazy obscene reason just says, Bears, I want to go to the Commanders and the Commanders only. I don't want to re-sign with y'all. I don't want to go to any other team. It's the Commanders. If he says something like that, I don't care how much you care about the other 2 linebackers. You trade for them. But at the same time, Rivera is just how he is. And if he is actually really high on Jamin Davis and Cole Holcomb and even some of the guys behind them in depth, then we're definitely out of the sweepstakes. Plus, with Cole Holcomb's contract coming up literally after this season, that means he's gone. And I would prefer to keep Cole Holcomb. Again, you got to do what you got to do to get Roquan Davis. That means Cole Holcomb walks. That means Cole Holcomb walks. I'm not going to lie. But that would suck to lose Cole Holcomb. I really like him, and I would just hope that we can somehow re-sign him to a cheaper deal than we originally would have, because, I mean, you add Roquan Smith, that probably takes you to Super Bowl contender, literally. But you would definitely risk losing Cole Holcomb, and that would make me sad. And then again, like I said earlier, that man is on a 1-year contract technically. He's on the last year of his rookie deal. He's a $9 million cap hit, and there's no guarantee that he'll re-sign with you long term unless you go ahead and get that situated during the trade. So we're definitely not in a position to get a 1-year rental, a really expensive one, and Roquan Davis. And then even after that, how much you gonna pay him? Again, Spot Track estimates that he's probably going for $17 million a year at least. Can we afford that? We're going to take a look at that during the salary cap and contract part of this video, which comes up next, but it's ugly. And then speaking of contracts and stuff, I mean, are we gonna pay Daron Payne, Montez Sweat, Cameron Curl? Already said Cole Holcomb. Within the next 2-3 years, we gotta pay pretty much everybody. How is that gonna work? And then also draft capital. Remember, we lost a 3rd round pick in this Carson Wentz trade, and it can become a 2nd round pick if Carson Wentz starts enough games, which ideally as a fan base, we hope he does. We want to go to the playoffs. We want to win a playoff game or 2, and we would love it if we went to the Super Bowl and won a ring. To do that, Carson Wentz is going to have to be a starting quarterback, hopefully for 17 games in the regular season and hopefully throughout the postseason. And at that point, that 3rd round pick that we lost upgrades to a 2nd round pick that we lose. So then what draft capital do we have? Do we give up our 1st round pick, and then even after that, what else do we add to it? Future 1st and 2nds and 3rds? Because we already lost ours in the Carson Wentz trade. And even just a 1st rounder and that's it, that's ugly. We won't be drafted until Saturday. We'll look like the Rams. We'll be making our 1st pick on Saturday. Also, you're definitely going to stifle the development of all the other linebackers, most notably Jamin Davis. You have Roquan Smith. Granted, that takes some pressure off of Jamin Davis, but at the same time, if we're going to be in 2 linebacker looks a lot of the time, and again, soon I'll explain how often we may be in 2 linebacker looks, and you add Roquan Smith, maybe you're encouraged. If you love Jamin Davis enough, you're out there with 3 linebackers more often than we're projected to be. But either way, he definitely stifles the development of Jamin Davis and takes snaps away from him. But then again, if you just go ahead and go head first into a consistent 3 linebacker look, which is like a very rare thing in the NFL at this point, but Jamin Davis should be able to cover. Roquan Smith is one of the elite coverage linebackers in the NFL. You actually could run 3 linebackers and still be really good against the pass. And I mean, maybe Jamin Davis with Roquan Smith and Cole Holcomb, Jamin Davis literally would just have to be a pure will linebacker and just strictly focus on basically almost being like a Buffalo nickel, which may bring out the best in them. Who knows? But either way, I don't see the Commanders doing it, because you just spent a 1st round pick on Jamin Davis, and they do want to see him be great. Spend a 1st round pick on a linebacker in the 2021 draft, and then turn around and use a 1st round pick to get another linebacker. And again, off-ball linebacker is not a very valued position at this point in the NFL. You really only need 2 of them on the field at any given time, the majority of the time. Which takes me to my point. We're going to be in 2 linebacker sets. Again, this is excluding Roquan Smith. Maybe they would change it up because you add Roquan Smith, especially if they're very high on Jamin Davis. But we're literally going to be in 2 linebacker looks with 5 DBs and 4 defensive linemen for like at least 80% of the snaps this year. And then maybe like 15% of them is still only going to be 2 linebackers, but 4 DBs and 5 defensive linemen. And then maybe 5% of the snaps will have 3 linebackers out there, maybe, if that. So scheme wise, it doesn't even necessarily make that much sense. But again, you get a Roquan Smith, you change up everything. I don't care. We are a pure 4-3 base defense. No more nickel. Even though I would love to see what Benjamin St-Juste, Derek Forrest, and Percy Butler can do at that nickel/Buffalo nickel spot. I'm really interested in seeing what they can do there because I think they can shine. And that's going to stifle them as well. By changing up the formation, they'll be on the field way less because you're going to take Kendall Fuller, William Jackson, Cameron Curl, or Bobby McCain off the field. I mean, Bobby McCain seems like an obvious answer out of that group amongst most fans, but he has a clear role in this defense, especially until Percy Butler can take over as our pure starting free safety, our rangy guy that I'm super excited about. But again, I'm this excited about Percy Butler, but that would stifle his development as well, as long as those other secondary guys, and again, Jamin Davis, like I already mentioned. And then lastly, we just don't do stuff like that. The Commanders, especially on the Ron Rivera, do not make splashes like that. Curtis Samuel and William Jackson are the biggest splashes I've seen us make, and I guess technically trading for Carson Wentz. We're not trading for a Roquan Smith. Since Ron Rivera's been here, and since I remember Ron Rivera doing anything in Carolina, he's never done anything this high profile. Anything, ever. Anything that splashy, anything with that caliber of talent through free agency or trade. So I just don't see it happening no matter what's going on. Even if we had the cap space, even if we had the draft capital, Ron Rivera is just not the type of guy to do that. And then also, let's take a look at this contract situation. Again, he is a $9.735 million cap hit this season. This is the last year of his rookie deal. Remember, this is his 5th-year option. And so as of right now, we're 14th in the NFL for 2022 in cap space with $10.857 million, which means we technically can afford them. We would only have barely like a little over $1 million left in cap space, but this year we technically could afford them. It would just be the problem of draft picks. But then when you look into the future, 2023 and beyond, it gets really ugly because as of right now, we're 17th in the league with negative $2.34 million cap hits. Again, we're 17th even though we're in a negative because a lot of teams are in a negative right now. That's just the way it goes when you project future contracts and cap space. We got to see how much it will increase with the new Amazon deals and stuff like that, new TV deals, all of that. We'll see. But as of right now, we're in a negative projection wise for 2023, so we definitely can't afford them. But then again, if you want to move some things around, if Carson Wentz isn't who we hoped he'd be, he's a $26 million cap hit next year, and we could cut him with no dead cap. That would immediately create $26 million worth of cap space. Also, William Jackson, if he's not producing, maybe you think about him. He's a $15.75 million cap hit. Curtis Samuel's a $13 million cap hit with the injury worries that we have. And you even have Charles Leno. I love him, and I don't want to get rid of him for any reason, but he's a $12.5 million cap hit. We're just going down a list of all of the top cap hits. And of course, Jonathan Allen is uncuttable, untradeable. That's completely out of the question. Then you have Kendall Fuller, an $11.625 million cap hit. Chase Roulier, top 5 center in the NFL. We're returning from injury, $11.37 million cap hit. Logan Thomas, $8.75. Bobby McCain, a $5 million cap hit. And then from there, it just goes lower and lower. So, I mean, there's ways to create cap space, even though I highly doubt it. If there were one person that is actually quite likely to not be here next year, and if we really wanted to create some cap space, it would obviously be Carson Wentz because he probably had a bad season. Even though, again, as fans, we're hoping he has a great season. We're hoping he's our franchise quarterback for like the next 10 years plus. That would be ideal. But if he ends up not working out and you wanted to get Roquan Smith, you can create $26 million worth of cap space by getting rid of Carson Wentz. And no dead cap at all. That's what's crazy about his contract and why we didn't move some of his cap hit from this year to next year or any further years. And then lastly, before we get up out of here, Bears GM Ryan Poles held a press conference and told reporters that his intention is to keep Roquan Smith and get an extension done. He said, quote, "I thought we would be in a better situation with Roquan. I'm a bit disappointed that we're in this spot." He said, quote, "I've always believed and always will believe that we take care of our own homegrown talent. We pay them, we take care of them." And then he also went on to say there's record-setting pieces of his contract that I thought was going to show him the respect he deserves. Obviously, he feels that hasn't been the case. And lastly, he also said it's got to make sense for both sides. Right now, we're not at that point. And I think it's going to be really hard to see either of those guys budge, but also I think it's even harder to move him to another team unless there's a Super Bowl contender that's willing to take a chance on him being a one-year rental and paying him crazy money afterwards and all of that type of stuff and giving up the draft capital to get him. It's going to be really hard. I think at the end of the day, he's just going to end up staying on the Bears, at least until the end of this season, and probably just go somewhere as a free agent. And then at that point, the Bears get no draft capital in return, and he ends up walking, because it's not like you're keeping Roquan Smith this season in hopes of a Super Bowl. So he's just going to walk away for free. Maybe you'll probably end up getting a really good comp pick, a third rounder at best, but you're better off trading them for a third round pick this season than letting them walk for free, because again, it'd be different if they were like Super Bowl contenders, but they couldn't afford them like the Bengals. The Bengals right now, you might as well just go ahead and let Jesse Bates play out on his contract and hope that you can try to win a Super Bowl, get back to the Super Bowl and actually win it this time, and maybe you can pay him at the end of the season. But even if he walks, at least you kept your team as talented as possible in hopes of winning a Super Bowl. The Bears, again, have no hopes of winning a Super Bowl this year, so there's no reason to keep Roquan Smith here as if you're trying to win games for real, and then he's just going to end up walking for free and you're not going to get any draft capital back. So it's a really interesting situation. We're definitely going to keep track of it. I know I am, especially as a Georgia Bulldogs fan. Even again, if we don't have any chance of getting them, I'm just a big fan of all my Georgia guys, and I'm really rooting for him to go somewhere where he can ball out and potentially win a Super Bowl. Again, as long as it's not another NFC East team other than us. And of course, I mean, with the Bears GM basically using the word intent, does not mean that they're going to keep any of their promises. This does not mean anything's a guarantee. He used the word intent, so that means nothing is set in stone. There can be a lot of intent, but no results. But yeah, man, at the end of the day, man, give me a Bulldog. Forget the logic, forget cap space, forget how it affects the team. I don't care. I'm ignoring all logic. I am not Rico of Street Scores right now. I am Rico, the Georgia Bulldog fan. Get me my Roquan Smith. Again, it literally makes almost no sense for us to trade for Roquan Smith. But at the end of the day, give me a Bulldog. Eli Wolf is the only current Georgia Bulldog on this team, and I highly doubt he's going to even make the team. And then before Eli Wolf, it was old Tom and Davis that barely even played for us. He was basically just an on-the-sideline coach at the linebacker position. And then before him, I don't even remember the last Georgia Bulldog we had. I would love to see some more synergy between my favorite college team and my favorite NFL team. It just hasn't happened much in my lifetime at all. So that would be a dream come true for me. Again, even more than most of y'all who aren't Georgia Bulldog fans. There's an extra layer for me. But again, I just highly doubt it happens, man. To be completely honest, I really want it to happen, but I just don't see any logical way that it really could happen. A lot of benefits, but way more reasons why it shouldn't and can't happen. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, man, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors. Name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm going to catch y'all later. I'm out.